Breaking. Keir just tried to pass a law so radical that King Charles did something no monarch has done in 312 years. He walked into Parliament, stopped the law dead in its tracks, and triggered a constitutional crisis that could destroy British democracy as we know it. The law was supposed to take effect at midnight tonight. It would have changed Britain forever. And what happened next shocked two continents. Starmer looked physically ill when he heard the news. His own cabinet is now plotting against him in secret WhatsApp groups, and Nigel Farage just called an emergency press conference that starts in 90 minutes. If you want to see how this constitutional apocalypse ends, hit that subscribe button right now because the next 72 hours will determine whether Britain survives as a free nation. Here's what sparked the mother of all constitutional battles. 4 days ago, Starmer pushed through emergency legislation called the Parliamentary Sovereignty Enhancement Act. His message was simple, but devastating. Strip the monarchy of its remaining ceremonial powers, transfer them entirely to Parliament, and reduce the crown to nothing more than a tourist attraction. The bill passed through the Commons with a razor-thin majority of just 14 votes. Over 47 Labour MPs either abstained or voted against their own government. That should have been Starmer's warning, but he wasn't listening. He charged forward with what witnesses describe as almost messianic determination. One Labour backbencher told The Telegraph, "He genuinely believed he was modernizing Britain, dragging us into the 21st century, whether we liked it or not." But King Charles wasn't having it. Charles didn't just object quietly through private letters. He invoked royal assent refusal, a power so ancient that most constitutional scholars thought it was extinct. The last time a British monarch refused royal assent was Queen Anne in 1708, blocking a Scottish militia bill. That was 316 years ago. Charles just shattered 3 centuries of precedent. At exactly 11:47 a.m. yesterday, palace officials delivered a sealed letter to the Speaker of the House. Inside was a single paragraph written in Charles's own handwriting. The words were chilling, precise, and absolutely brutal. "I cannot in good conscience grant royal assent to legislation that fundamentally alters the constitutional balance my ancestors swore to protect. This act threatens the delicate equilibrium that has preserved British democracy through war, depression, and revolution. I must respectfully but firmly decline." The response was swift and devastating. Within minutes, Starmer called an emergency cabinet meeting. Witnesses inside number 10 describe absolute pandemonium. Shouting echoed through corridors. Security staff looked genuinely frightened. One junior minister was seen hyperventilating into a paper bag. According to sources who were actually in the room, Starmer slammed both fists on the cabinet table and roared, "Who does he think he is? This is 2025, not 1725. The Crown serves Parliament, not the other way around." Chancellor Rachel Reeves reportedly tried to calm him down, warning that his reaction was making things worse. Starmer allegedly turned on her and snapped, "Unless you want to be the next one out the door, I suggest you remember whose side you're on." The temperature in that room, according to multiple sources, was somewhere between panic and mutiny. Starmer emerged 90 minutes later looking, according to the Daily Telegraph's chief political correspondent, like a man who just watched his entire world collapse in real time. Meanwhile, British veterans who fought in the Falklands, Iraq, and Afghanistan are being told there's no money for proper mental health services. Take James Patterson, a 62-year-old former Royal Marine from Portsmouth who served 3 tours in Afghanistan. James waited 14 months for PTSD treatment through the NHS. 14 months watching his marriage crumble, his nightmares worsen, his life fall apart. He finally got an appointment last Tuesday. It lasted 23 minutes. The therapist apologized, explained the system was overwhelmed, and scheduled his next session for 4 months away. James broke down in the parking lot. His wife found him an hour later sitting in his car staring at nothing. "I risked my life for this country," James told GB News yesterday. "I watched mates die, and now I'm treated like I don't matter because there's no money in the budget." While James and thousands like him suffer in silence, Starmer and his Labour MPs enjoy taxpayer-funded private health care worth $12,000 per year each. We're talking same-day appointments, specialist consultations, comprehensive mental health coverage, private hospitals with 5-star amenities, The contrast is so obscene, so morally bankrupt that even traditional labor supporters are questioning their loyalty. Mary Chen, a 71-year-old retired nurse from Newcastle who voted Labour for 50 years, recorded a video that's gone viral across Facebook. "I believed in this party my whole life," she said, voice shaking. "But when they attack our king while ignoring our veterans, they've lost their way completely. This isn't politics anymore. This is a betrayal of the people who literally bled for Britain, while politicians who never wore the uniform feast on privileges they never earned." Then something unprecedented happened that nobody saw coming. King Charles broke 70 years of royal protocol and summoned the Privy Council for an emergency session at Buckingham Palace. At 3:15 p.m. yesterday, senior government ministers, opposition leaders, and constitutional experts gathered in the palace's blue drawing room. The attendance list alone was extraordinary. The Archbishop of Canterbury, 5 former Supreme Court justices, the heads of all 3 military branches, and representatives from every Commonwealth realm. This wasn't just a meeting. This was Charles mobilizing every constitutional authority available to him. Charles delivered what palace insiders are calling the most politically charged speech by a British monarch since World War II. For centuries, the crown has served as the final constitutional safeguard against tyranny. Whether from monarch or parliament, Charles declared with barely controlled fury. When Parliament threatened the people's rights in 1689, the Crown intervened. When Parliament granted us this reserve power, it was not ornamental. It was insurance against precisely this kind of constitutional vandalism. I have consulted extensively with legal scholars, religious leaders, and constitutional historians. The consensus is overwhelming. This legislation threatens the very foundations of British democracy. The hidden meaning was crystal clear. Starmer had pushed too far, and the king was pushing back with the full weight of Britain's constitutional architecture behind him. Palace insiders reveal that Charles spent 3 days consulting with former Supreme Court justices, constitutional historians, and even reached out privately to the Archbishop of Canterbury. He also personally called the Governor-General of Canada, the Governor-General of Australia, and the Prime Minister of New Zealand. All expressed support for his position. The consensus was unanimous. If any law in modern British history justified royal assent refusal, this was it. The optics are absolutely devastating for Starmer, who now looks like a power-hungry extremist attempting a constitutional coup. While the king appears as the defender of centuries of democratic tradition, the domino effect hit like a financial tsunami. Within 2 hours of Charles's refusal, the pound sterling dropped 4.2% against the dollar, the worst single-day crash since Brexit. International investors already nervous about British stability began pulling capital out of London at alarming rates. By market close yesterday, £8.7 billion had been wiped from the FTSE 100. Major pension funds lost billions in valuation. Ordinary Britons watching their retirement accounts shrink felt the panic spreading. Goldman Sachs downgraded Britain's economic outlook from stable to negative. JP Morgan issued a client memo warning of severe constitutional instability with unknown economic ramifications. Deutsche Bank analysts wrote that Britain now carries elevated political risk comparable to emerging markets. Inside the Conservative Party, MPs who'd been divided over strategy suddenly found unity in attacking Labour's constitutional recklessness. Former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called it the most dangerous assault on British institutions since Oliver Cromwell. Even moderate Tories, who usually avoid dramatic language, used words like catastrophic and unprecedented. Boris Johnson, rarely one to miss an opportunity, declared on social media, "Starmer has managed the impossible, making my time in office look stable and competent by comparison." Across social media, the explosion was instant and brutal. Burstiar, Defend the King trended globally for 19 consecutive hours, hitting #1 in Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Starmer resign accumulated 2.1 million mentions in 36 hours. TikTok videos mocking Starmer's constitutional overreach gained 47 million combined views. One particularly viral video showed Starmer's face photoshopped onto Oliver Cromwell's body dissolving Parliament, while God Save the King played ironically in the background. It hit 8.3 million views in 24 hours. Street protests erupted across 23 British cities. In Manchester, 15,000 people marched carrying Union Jack signs reading, "Hands off our king." Similar scenes played out in Birmingham, Liverpool, Edinburgh, and Cardiff. What's remarkable is these weren't organized protests. They were spontaneous eruptions of public anger. Inside Number 10, the atmosphere went from panic to absolute chaos. Ministers are openly fighting in hallways, with Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and Foreign Secretary David Lammy reportedly screaming at each other about who's responsible for the disaster. According to Westminster sources, Cooper blamed Lammy for not warning about international backlash. Lammy fired back that Cooper should have anticipated domestic opposition. Neither accepted any responsibility. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner allegedly told Starmer to his face during a heated cabinet meeting, "You've destroyed us. You've absolutely destroyed everything we built." Starmer reportedly responded by questioning her loyalty, which only made things worse. Defense Secretary John Healey was overheard in the Commons tea room saying, "We look like bloody revolutionaries trying to overthrow the Constitution. This is insane." Shadow ministers from the opposition gleefully recorded his comments. WhatsApp groups with names like Post-Starmer Strategy and Emergency Leadership Options are plotting his removal in real time. One group, according to leaked screenshots obtained by The Sun, includes 67 Labour MPs. They're not discussing if Starmer should go. They're discussing when and how to make it happen without triggering a general election. They'd certainly lose. The question isn't if they'll force him out. It's when they can do it without making the crisis worse. Names being floated as replacements include Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, and even Wes Streeting. Starmer looked haggard and defeated at yesterday's emergency press conference. Sources say he barely slept, surviving on coffee and desperation. His hands trembled as he read his prepared statement. His eyes, normally sharp and focused, looked empty. One cabinet minister texted a journalist friend, "He knows it's over. He's just trying to figure out how to exit without taking the entire party down with him. But here's the twist that could trigger complete governmental collapse." Leaked documents from the House of Commons library show that Starmer's legal team knew royal assent refusal was possible. A confidential memo dated 3 weeks ago obtained by The Times explicitly warned that pushing constitutional reform this aggressively risked royal intervention. The memo's conclusion was stark. Proceeding without consensus invites constitutional crisis and potential refusal of royal assent. Historical precedent suggests the Crown retains this power in extremis. We strongly advise consultation with Buckingham Palace before proceeding. If these documents are real, and if they show what multiple sources claim, then Starmer didn't just miscalculate. He deliberately ignored warnings and walked Britain straight into a constitutional disaster. Think about what that means. The Prime Minister was told his law might trigger royal intervention, ignored the warning, dismissed his own legal advisors, pushed it through anyway, and is now acting shocked that exactly what he was warned about happened. The optics of that would be absolutely devastating. This isn't incompetence anymore. It's reckless arrogance that put personal ideology above national stability. Labour MPs are reportedly furious that Starmer never disclosed these warnings. Several backbenchers told The Guardian they feel betrayed, lied to, and used as pawns in Starmer's personal crusade against the monarchy. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is moving like a grandmaster who just put his opponent in checkmate. While Starmer flails and Labour implodes, Farage stood before cameras yesterday with Union Jacks flanking him and spoke with the calm authority of a man who knows he's already won. King Charles has shown more courage, more constitutional wisdom, and more love for Britain in one decision than this entire Labour government has shown in months. Farage declared, "While they attack our institutions, we defend them. While they forget our history, we honor it. And while they plot against the Crown, we stand with the Crown." He paused, letting the words sink in, then continued. "The British people understand something this government doesn't. You cannot have democracy without stability. You cannot have stability without tradition. And you cannot have tradition without respecting the constitutional monarchy that has guided us for 1,000 years." The polls tell the story of a political earthquake in progress. Latest YouGov numbers show Conservatives at 31%, Labour collapsing to 23%, and Reform UK surging to an unprecedented 27%. For the first time in British political history, Reform UK is statistically tied for second place and within striking distance of first. Farage isn't just a protest figure anymore. He's a legitimate contender for 10 Downing Street. Reform UK membership has exploded by 520% in 4 days. Donations are flooding in from small donors across Britain and the Commonwealth. Former Labour voters are defecting by the thousands, bringing decades of working-class loyalty with them. In traditional Labour strongholds like Hartlepool, Sunderland, and Stoke-on-Trent, Reform UK is now leading in local polling. These are towns that have voted Labour for generations. The political map of Britain is being redrawn in real time. The international implications are staggering and deeply troubling for Britain's global standing. In Washington, State Department officials privately expressed concern about British stability to journalists. One senior diplomat told CNN, "We're watching our closest ally tear itself apart over an issue most democracies resolved centuries ago." In Brussels, European Union leaders watched with barely concealed satisfaction. French President Emmanuel Macron reportedly told aides, "Brexit was their choice. Chaos is apparently their destiny." The German Chancellor's office issued a statement expressing hope for swift resolution to Britain's internal difficulties. The diplomatic language was polite. The subtext was brutal. Britain looks weak, divided, and unstable. Commonwealth nations found themselves caught in an impossible position. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand all share King Charles as their head of state. If Britain diminishes the monarchy, what happens to their constitutional arrangements? Canadian Prime Minister's office issued a carefully worded statement supporting the constitutional traditions that bind the Commonwealth together. Australian opposition leaders were less diplomatic, with one calling Starmer's legislation an attack on our shared heritage. New Zealand's parliament held an emergency debate on what Britain's crisis means for their own constitutional future. The next 96 hours are absolutely critical for Britain's future. Parliament reconvenes Monday morning for an emergency session. Starmer must either withdraw his legislation, face a confidence vote, or attempt to override royal opposition through constitutional mechanisms that haven't been tested in 3 centuries. Legal experts warned that forcing the issue could trigger the biggest constitutional crisis since the English Civil War, potentially even questioning the monarchy's existence. Some constitutional scholars argue Parliament could theoretically override royal refusal with a supermajority vote. Others insist that doing so would violate centuries of constitutional convention and potentially trigger intervention from the courts, the military, or even Commonwealth realms. Britain is watching its government and its king locked in a battle that will define the nation for generations. This crisis will be studied in law schools and history departments for decades as the moment when modern Britain either preserved its constitutional heritage or tore it apart. At its epicenter stands Keir Starmer, who looks increasingly isolated, desperate, and finished. His political career, once promising and full of potential, now hangs by a thread so thin it might snap at any moment. So here's the question that matters. Did Starmer just commit political suicide? Did King Charles save British democracy or overstep his bounds? Will Nigel Farage actually become the next Prime Minister of Britain? What do you think happens when Parliament reconvenes on Monday morning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And right now, we need to hear from real Britons about where this country is headed. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to see what's really happening in Westminster right now. The mainstream media is already spinning this to protect Labour, but we're giving you the unfiltered truth. Next video drops in 48 hours covering the emergency Parliament session and whether Starmer can survive the weekend. This constitutional crisis is far from over. Subscribe now because what happens next could change Britain forever.